is Dr. Heather Exner-Pirot, Senior Fellow of the Macdonald-Cartier Institute. To ensure an orderly meeting, I'd like to outline a few rules for all of us to follow. Members or witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services in English, French, and Inuktitut are available for the first part of today's meeting. Please be patient with the interpretation. The interpretation button is found at the bottom of your screen for those of you who are virtual, and you can listen in either English or French. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. For those in the room, that'll be done by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, please mute your mic. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. We'll start off as usual with our two witnesses each having 5 minutes for introductory remarks. I would ask them to keep that at 5 minutes, and then we'll proceed with the first round of questions. So I'd now like to invite Dr. Heather Nicol to start us off. Dr. Nicol, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I was actually hoping that Heather Exner-Pirot would go first because she's always got, I think, more interesting and more informed things to say to me. But I'm speaking from the perspective of an educator, somebody who has been involved in the delivery of courses, particularly through UArctic circumpolar courses, and works at an institution which has a focus on educating about the North, but not from the perspective of the North. And that's led me to, I think, something that I would like to share with you today that I take quite seriously, which is how to align the current needs for education and curriculum and educational development in the North, which is something I'm quite interested in, with the need for developing, for maintaining and creating culturally relevant and co-created curriculum. But to align that more specifically with another great, I think, need in education in the North, which for education in the North, which I think has really is underdeveloped and needs, particularly in light of events that have happened both over the weekend in the East Coast and more sadly in Western Canada, in James Smith Cree Nation, the need for training and co-development of post-secondary accredited education at existing Northern institutions on disaster management, on community policing, on logistical planning and response, all of which require both specialized equipment and highly qualified personnel at the community level. And I note that Canada's Arctic and Northern Policy Framework suggests the capacity of Northern communities to face the looming threat of climate change and human vulnerability has to be developed in order to deliver and ensure security in the North. But I don't think really that policy framework doesn't encourage the development of civilian capacity in specific ways. And I've made a submission before with Christian Luprecht, Dr. Luprecht from the Royal Military College, on the role of Canadian Armed Forces. But I think that it's more than this. I'd argue there's a broader responsibility. I've been involved in many activities designed to raise awareness of the need for civilian and military involvement in delivery of human security in the North, and even at the meetings which are designed to talk about the role of defense and military, communities' responses that we need to be trained ourselves, that we're on the front line of the arc of unprecedented climate change, other forms of disaster, or forms of disaster created by climate change and vulnerability, and other forms of insecurities that are coming about because of increased human activity in the North, and we need to be trained. And I know, and I'm not going to, we can talk about this later, there's a number of programs from the government side that are looking to increase capacity in training. What I'm talking about really is accredited post-secondary education. We've got some of the CHARS, the High Research Lab in Cambridge Bay, the High Arctic Research Station, and that's there to attract a scientific community to the north and encourage it to interact with northern communities. But we haven't, to my knowledge, there developed any kind of sustained accredited civic program for training and disaster response. And I think that we've spoken, and again, we can talk about this later, we speak often about building cultural resiliency in the North and co-creating programs and curriculum for that. But I think that developing capacity in the North is incredibly important, specifically because if you note throughout Canada, there are probably 9 universities that offer disaster training at both the undergraduate and graduate level, or just, along these kinds of lines. None of them are oriented towards northern disaster, northern response, northern planning, northern logistics. And this is a very different and very different context and situation for training. So there are models. There are models for the sort of thing that I'm proposing. I'm proposing basically appropriate funding for targeted programming at institutions that could be encouraged to develop appropriate regional training and research from a northern point of view. So it's research and curriculum that I think is interesting. There are models. Certainly, there are models in Alaska of centers that have been developed to do this sort of thing. But only 2 universities in Canada offer comprehensive disaster management curriculum at the undergraduate level, and then there are several more that offer at the graduate level as well. So in light of those realities, I think a targeted funding focus for program development at the federal and provincial territorial level could serve to increase overall public safety and emergency management capacity and capability in the Arctic and its communities, consistent, I think, with the aspirations of the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework.
Thank you, Dr. Nicol. We'll now go to Dr. Exner-Pirot. I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name. Correct me if I'm wrong. Thank you. You have 5 minutes. I think you're on mute.
How's this? Is this better? All right, thank you. Well, good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. And it's a pleasure to follow on the remarks from my colleague, Dr. Nicol. I want to focus my opening remarks on how I believe the Russian invasion of Ukraine has impacted Arctic security and the ways that Canada should respond. I'm a student of the Arctic Council and have long admired and celebrated the ability of that forum and of Arctic cooperation in general to compartmentalize itself from broader geopolitical tensions. And I know, Mr. Chair, that you were Canada's representative at the last Arctic Council Ministerial. I have led a group of fellow scholars to nominate the Arctic Council for the Nobel Peace Prize and have authored peer-reviewed articles describing the Arctic's exceptionalism in international affairs. So it is with a heavy heart that I now consider the extraordinary period of Arctic cooperation between Russia and the West, beginning in 1987 with Mikhail Gorbachev's famous Murmansk speech calling for the Arctic to be a zone of peace, to be over. And the work of building a new era.
Je m'excuse. On me dit que la traduction présentement est impossible à faire compte tenu de la qualité du son.
Interpretation here is having a hard time because of the quality of the sound.
Exner-Pirot, we're having a translation problem at the moment. Can you just hold on a sec? We'll pause. You won't lose any time.
If it's helpful, sir, it's exactly the notes that I gave them. I won't change from it anymore.
Pour Madame Gill, apparemment.
Madame Gill, apparently it's an incompatible headset. It's not quite up to the standards. And would you like her to continue? She says the text is exactly, she'll present it exactly as written.
Très bien. Merci.
Okay, thank you.
So, Dr. Exner-Pirot, if you would continue your testimony, please.
Thank you. I have three main recommendations to prepare for this new Arctic security paradigm. The first is one the government has already undertaken, and that is to adequately fund NORAD modernization. I want to express my support for this position, and I hope, as I know all of you do, that Northern Indigenous communities and businesses will benefit economically from the investments being made and be included in the civilian decision-making processes. Nuclear deterrence and continental defense are not luxuries that we can put on the back burner any longer. The second is for Canada to welcome and support a stronger NATO presence in the Arctic. Both conservative and liberal governments have opposed this in the past for good reasons, but the imperative to defend against Russia, especially as the northern flank of NATO will get much larger with Finland and Sweden joining, is now much different. I will say that the probability of military conflict in the Canadian Arctic remains very low, but it is much higher in Northern Europe, especially in the Baltics and around the Barents Sea, and Canada should prepare to support its allies there. The third that has been less discussed is how to proceed with the Arctic Council. It is currently on pause, and the question of how and to what extent to involve Russia is being debated now in foreign ministries in Washington, Oslo, Copenhagen, Helsinki, and beyond. There are no easy answers, but I am convinced that the Arctic Council cannot go on as it has and must become an A7. I cannot imagine having ministerial meetings and family photos with Sergei Lavrov or any other Russian minister so long as Putin is in power. And any regime change will take years, and Putin may be replaced by someone worse. It'll be too long to simply pause, so we must evolve. There remain issues that require communication and even cooperation with Russia, such as understanding and mitigating the impacts of climate change, managing the development of fisheries in the Arctic Ocean, or regulating marine shipping. I believe we can create space for this to be done at a technical level and on issue-specific concerns without the restraints and concessions that a regional organization such as the Arctic Council would impose.
Réflexion faite.
Perhaps the question was not mentioned earlier, but perhaps there would be a French copy of this presentation, so perhaps out of equity and fair play for English and French, perhaps I'd prefer that if we wait until I have a translated version of the presentation so that we can follow together. With my apologies to Madame Exner-Pirot. Well, Madam Gill, it'll take about a week or so to get the translation. Oh, I understand that full well. Well, okay. Unfortunately, we will stop at this point, and we will get you on the question period.
To stop at that point, Doctor, and we'll proceed with question period. However, if a question is addressed to you, we're not going to be able to have that, unfortunately, because the translation is not available of sufficient quality. So I look to you to the translation, the quality is not of sufficient quality for the translators to take the English that is being spoken and to translate it in French, unfortunately. So we're stuck in that situation. I would have thought this would have been checked beforehand.
We did check, and unfortunately, it
didn't work out. Well, we should have been notified. So I'm afraid we have only one alternative, colleagues, and that is to ask our questions to Dr. Nicol. What say you? Apparently not. We talked to the IT people, but okay, let's wait for 5 minutes and see if we can do something about it. We're going to pause for 5 minutes. Just please stand by. Si ça marche.
Now, if you'd like to come back to the table, Madam Gill, if you're ready, we're going to test once again and see if the interpretation can be received properly.
I understand you're wearing a different headset. Let's give that a go. And if that doesn't work well, we'll go to Plan B. But please start off, and the interpreters will let us know soon enough if it isn't working. Please go ahead.
Great. I will. Good morning, everyone. So I'll go through it again so that the French speakers can benefit. I'll start with the 3 recommendations to prepare for the new Arctic Security Program paradigm. The first is the one the government has undertaken, that is to adequately fund NORAD modernization. I want to express my support for their position and my hope, as I know all of you share, that Northern Indigenous communities and businesses benefit economically from the investments being made and be included in the decision-making processes. Nuclear deterrence and continental defense are not luxuries that we can put on the back burner any longer. The second is for Canada to welcome and support a stronger NATO presence in the Arctic. Both conservative and liberal governments have opposed this in the past for good reasons, but the imperative to defend against Russia, especially as the northern flank of NATO will get much larger with Finland and Sweden joining, is now much different. I will say that the probability of military conflict in the Canadian Arctic remains very low, but it is much higher in Northern Europe, especially in the Baltics and around the Barents Sea, and Canada should prepare to support its allies there. Third, that has been less discussed, is how to proceed with the Arctic Council. It is currently on pause, and the question of how and to what extent to involve Russia is being debated in foreign ministries in Washington, Oslo, Copenhagen, Helsinki, and beyond. There are no easy answers, but I am convinced that the Arctic Council cannot go on as it has and must become an A7. I cannot imagine having ministerial meetings and family photos with Sergei Lavrov or any other Russian minister so long as Putin is in power. And any regime change will take years, and Putin may be replaced by someone worse. It will take too long to just pause, so we must evolve. There remain issues that require communication and even cooperation with Russia, such as understanding and mitigating the impacts of climate change, managing the development of fisheries in the Arctic Ocean, or regulating marine shipping. I believe we can create space for this to be done at a technical level and on issue-specific concerns without the restraints and concessions that a regional organization such as the Arctic Council would impose. I want to conclude by reiterating for the committee that Russia has taken the choice of pursuing Arctic cooperation away from us. The West did everything possible to make it work and maintain a zone of peace for 3 decades. But now they have pushed us into a position where we can no longer paper over our differences. Russia has started a war of aggression. Russia has committed war crimes. Russia has threatened nuclear warfare. And Russia has plunged Europe and the world into an energy crisis. There is a fine line between cooperation and appeasement, and in retrospect, I fear we crossed it with our reaction to Russia's invasion of Crimea in 2014. Because of our muted response, Russia was emboldened to invade Ukraine and commit its war crimes, and now the world is in crisis. It is not business as usual anywhere, least of all the Arctic. Canada can lead in creating new processes, institutions, and cooperation without them, not to antagonize Russia, but to deter them from future aggression. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Exner-Pirot. We'll now proceed with the first round of questions, beginning with the Conservatives. Mr. Vidal, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank both witnesses today, and I'm going to try to get to both of you here in my time, but I'm going to start with Ms. Exner-Pirot. Your third recommendation, talking about the Arctic Council becoming an A7 going forward, you talked about the status of it currently being on pause, but that we must evolve. I would be curious to hear your perspective on how that plays out in the element of what I understand on the Arctic Council to be the Indigenous permanent participants process, where there's a number of organizations and entities that are represented there, and they don't have any kind of legal standing, but they are able to have significant input. But some of those organizations include representation from Russia as well, if I look at the history of that. So in the context of the Arctic Council becoming an A7 going forward, how does that translate through to the Indigenous permanent participants process in that council, in your opinion, please?
That's a great question. And I was actually at a workshop in Boston when there was members from Gwich'in and also from the Sami there, and they had some opinions on this, and I'm happy to share. that is obviously the benefit of the Arctic Council. And so there is concern from the Indigenous side that if you get rid of the Arctic Council, where will be the place that Indigenous peoples are included to the level that they have been in the Arctic Council? But in the status quo right now, it is not safe either for Russian Indigenous participants to speak out and to participate. And the Samyang Chin members remarked that they are not sure how they can approach or talk to their Russian colleagues without compromising their safety, and not sure what their Russian colleagues can say. There are 6 permanent participants. 4 of them have Russian participation. One of them is exclusively Russian, Raypon, and they have come out in favor of the war in Ukraine. So there isn't a lot of sympathy, I guess, to entertain Raypon's inclusion, but with the other 3 permanent participants, that's a question that remains. So that would be why I would favor having an Arctic 7, and it'll be up to the Indigenous permanent participants how they can maintain that collaboration with their Russian colleagues. But that would be the reason why you don't want to just get rid of all of Arctic Council or not have an A7, because everything would just kind of devolve into bilateral state institutions and not have that strong Indigenous component.
Thank you for that. I always appreciate your very thoughtful and intelligent response to any of the questions that we have. I'm going to flip over to Ms. Nicol for a minute. And you opened up a line of questioning for me that I wasn't thinking about today, Ms. Nicol, when you talked about the James Smith Cree Nation events of the last few weeks here, and you talked about community policing. And I had the privilege of meeting with one of the vice chiefs of the tribal council, of which James Smith Cree Nation is a member nation. And we talked about both community policing, but beyond that, we talked about a community safety program that's more than just First Nations policing. And we also talked about the need to educate local people to be part of both of those components. So I'm just curious about giving you an opportunity to just flesh that out a little bit, based on kind of what you spoke of in your opening comments, and just give a bit more time to talk about that specifically, please.
Dr. Nicol, you're on mute.
There we are. Yeah. And then again, thank you very much for the question. And again, although I certainly not by no means an expert in community policing, I do understand that there are several ways to approach community policing from an educational and training perspective. And I know in my experience with Northern Canada that that's a little thinner on the ground than in the southern parts of Canada. When some of the examples I have seen, involve sending people for training out of the communities, and training is one thing, and training can be a couple of weeks long for community policing, but there are also community policing programs. I know we have one at my institution. It's not Northern focused, but we have had discussions with some agencies about trying to flesh that out and create a greater focus. But I don't think Trent University is necessarily the place to do community policing for the North. I think there are programs, there are curriculum, and with any curriculum, particularly in Northern Canada, it has to be contextualized and it has to be co-created for communities themselves. And I also think that, and broadening that out to thinking about public safety, it's very much the same issue. And it's not just knowledge, it's also knowledge of logistics and planning. It's also knowledge of equipment and how to manage that, and understanding all different agencies that are involved. And I think this is a much bigger project.
Doctor, I'm just going to interject quickly because I've got about 30 seconds, and I just want to I want you to just really quickly maybe speak to the cultural component that would be so very relevant in the training aspect of either community safety or community policing.
Yeah, I think that giving a sense of the goals, the point of policing, the objects of policing, the problems. These are local. These are culturally contextualized, and they have to be addressed from local community cultural perspectives, and they'll be quite different from community to community. And I think this is an opportunity to co-create at a community level, to co-create and work with educational partners to tailor courses at post-secondary institutions that are already existing in the North, to tailor them more specifically. And there are a number of them, so it doesn't have to be one size fits all. But it builds cultural resilience as well.
Thank you, Mr. Vidal. We'll now go to Ms. Atwin. Ms. Atwin, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our two witnesses this morning. I'd just like to preface with an acknowledgement that I'm coming to you from the unceded, unsurrendered Wolastoq territories here in Fredericton, New Brunswick. And of course, conversations around emergency preparedness, I'm very much thinking about our colleagues and communities in the Atlantic. We're doing okay here in New Brunswick, but all Maritimers are connected. So we're very much thinking about everyone who's been seriously impacted by Hurricane Fiona. Dr. Nicol, I'd love to begin with you, and I very much appreciate the educator perspective that you brought to the conversation today, as that's also where I identify. And again, to kind of go along with it, you've also opened up a new line of questioning for myself as well, as far as how do we characterize what a disaster is or what an emergency is. And James Smith Cree First Nation certainly, I think, would fit in that category. And I didn't previously anticipate that, so I want to thank you for bringing that into our discussion today. And you mentioned a lot about the need for research and programming, and that's certainly, again, where my headspace was previous to coming into politics. And there have been so many studies with incredible recommendations that have come out as far as supporting Indigenous communities in the North, as far as kind of all these topics that we're dealing with. And I'm just wondering, how can we be more effective in better communicating findings and actually implementing those recommendations, so we're not seeing these reports just kind of collect dust on a shelf? Thank you.
That's a great question. I think first of all, it's not. If we say the horse is out of the barn, and maybe some of them are already collecting dust, and we won't be able to go back and dust them off and hand them out. But I think going forward, I've seen some really interesting models being used in Northern education in the institutions that are there, and certainly proceeding from the notion constantly that it's a shared research project, shared curriculum. I think there's lots, certainly a number of precedents of co-created research that is shared, and there's a knowledge about that. I think the problem is, I hope I'm answering this, but shifting that northward so that, in my experience, that co-creation, because it's generally initiated, the big projects and the big reports generally come from Southern institutions, and that's just fine. But the knowledge doesn't get institutionalized in Northern universities. I think the biggest message is, prioritize and fund Northern institutions, and not just one or two. I know there's a smaller population based in the South, but if you look at places like UNBC, you've got a student population of 3,000 students, roughly 3,000 to 4,000, and that is a very effective, and that's a world-class institution, and so you don't have to have something the size of one U of T in the North. You need to have a number of high-caliber, distributed institutions that offer culturally relevant, sort of co-created curriculum, and it's a two-way street. That information comes south. It isn't just us informing, because we don't have a sense of what the ins and outs of the experts are there. The experts are in the North.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I'm going to completely switch gears, which I think characterizes the complex nature of this study, to Dr. Exner-Pirot and what you brought forward today. I'm particularly interested in the role of the Arctic Council, as you mentioned, and more specifically, you mentioned the idea of Indigenous voices being adequately, included in that space. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like and how we can kind of safeguard that being the process moving forward?
Dr. Exner-Pirot, are you with us, or it looks like the image is frozen? Okay, let's just pause and see what. I've stopped the clock, but we'll see if we can regain Dr. Exner-Pirot.
Yes, my sincere apologies. Now I'm on a laptop and the Wi-Fi is poor, which is why I tried the other computer and set up before.
Okay, so Miss Adwin, we have a minute and 37 seconds. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad you're back with us, Dr. Exner-Pirot. My question was for you around the role of the Arctic Council. Very curious to learn more about it in particular. And you mentioned specifically how Indigenous voices had been included. I'd love to learn more about that process and how to safeguard ensuring that as it moves forward in this new paradigm that we also include Indigenous voices.
So I'll be quick. The Arctic Council is not a treaty organization, it's a forum. And the main benefits, notionally, it works on environmental protection and sustainable development, but its main benefits have been cooperation with Russia, frankly, and including the Indigenous voice. And so the question is, how can it go forward with Russia or not go forward as it is? And I made my thoughts on that clear. But how can it go forward with Indigenous voices, I guess, then is the next step. If there was agreement that something has to change with Russia, there are 6 permanent participants, not exactly representative of all Indigenous peoples and all Northerners, but of those 6 groups that have some international Indigenous, coverage. And they are very influential, although it's a normative. There are no votes. They don't get a vote, but no one votes. All the senior Arctic officials are very respectful and inclusive and appreciate the perspective of the Indigenous people. So the question going forward is, you can't just go into NATO. You can't just go into the International Maritime Organization, because those don't have the same level of Indigenous participation. And that's why retaining something of the Arctic Council is worthwhile. And so from my perspective, it's either an A7 with exactly the same rules of procedure, exactly the same declaration, or we take this opportunity to create a new A7.
Thank you, Ms. Atwin. Nous irons maintenant à Madame Gill.
Now, Madam Gill, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I regret what happened a little while ago. I know we're here, and it's fairly important that the interpreters can hear in order that they can interpret. The question is quite interesting. I'd like to ask a few questions of Ms. Nicol as to how the programs would work. I know you're in the north and you'll have an Arctic perspective. We would, of course, appreciate that we get the research done at home, so to speak, locally. But what would you like to identify perhaps as the shortcomings or the elements that are missing in these programs in the north? We're looking for programs, whether it's first phase, second phase. There is a lack in the training and education and towards management issues for this situation, and it's institutions in the north that should be conducting this research. How would this change the consequences for Arctic communities? Thank you.
I didn't get that in translation. Could I get just a quick translation of the question? I caught the gist of it, but not so much the end.
So, Dr. Nicol, do you have your little interpretation symbol at the bottom, which is a globe? And put English as the one you want, and that's when you get it simultaneously. All right, so I won't count the time, s'il vous plaît, Madame Gill.
So, Ms. Gill, if you'd like to resume or start again, and hopefully the interpreter will be heard. Thank you very much, Chair. What I'd like to say to both witnesses, I really appreciated both of your presentations, and my first questions are to Dr. Nicol as to the programming, that it would be important to have complete, comprehensive training offered in the north. And you are the expert, you are on site. So my question deals with the perspective of getting the Arctic perspective up north. What are the elements that you find absent, if you will, to improve community safety in the north? What are the needs, if you will, rather, that we would identify as fulfilling and completing the education which seems to be lacking, either first phase or the second phase? Thank you.
Wonderful. Good question. Thank you. I will begin by saying that there's not a total lack of understanding of what I would call human security, this broadly defined way of seeing security and safety in the north as related to spectrum of climate change, increased human activities, environmental changes that are happening rapidly. All of these notions of what human security is and education around human security isn't is not entirely lacking at all. There are the U-Arctic and has had a circumpolar curriculum that involves Northern students for a number of years, and that's sort of baked into that. But also there are institutions now with Northern studies and Arctic and subarctic studies that do bring along these basic ideas of sort of the need and the changing capacity and the changing way in which security could be understood. But what is missing is not, again, there's research into media, there's scientific research going on, there's research into cause and effect, there's research into what's happening, but what is missing is this piece in the middle that brings that knowledge and those results into a comprehensive, accredited training program existing within the curriculum of both new institutions that are being proposed, and I know that that's the case, but existing accredited institutions. There's Memorial's got, its new Labrador campus, and Yukon U has moved from Yukon College to Yukon University. So there are appropriate, I think, post-secondary institutions. I think below that, there is certainly, below and hierarchically, but below in terms of the level of intensity, there is clear room for shorter, more vocational training in specific areas. And that, I think, is probably underway as I speak. But it's this notion of creating a generation of Northerners who can envision and who envision and can bring that vision of security needs for the North and bring it to their institutions to train further experts, to make it normative that this is a career option, that this is a service that you can provide for your community, and this is a way of building knowledge and resilience and supporting and preserving your communities in the future. So it's a situated curriculum based on, I think, a very, very important need.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to ask a question of Ms. Perroux. This issue of Russia, right now, of course, they're absent from the table, understandably so. But the issue of the Indigenous participants, First Nations, if the Russians are not there, the Sami will not be fully represented. And if you were to have an A7, as you've mentioned in your presentation, how can we ensure that these communities are representative? Because they should be. They are permanent members, and they won't have the equal access to the various discussions it's not very easy for the Arctic Council to operate fully and in full capacity if they're absent. So now, what would be your impression? How would you structure? How would you integrate the so-called missing members from the Russian territory?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. From my perspective, it's not necessarily true that if the Russian state is not representative, that Russians in the Sami Council or the Aleut or the ICC are not represented. I would think that it would be up to those organizations, the ICC and the Aleut and the Sami, to decide how to converse, communicate, and work with their Russian colleagues and how to represent their interests in the Arctic Council. I will say it is...
Madame Pirot, je reviens.
I don't want to interrupt you. I've just come back from the Arctic Council, and the issue was raised, the Sami representation or their absence, perhaps. Thank you.
It is my observation that it's rare anyways that the people that attend the Arctic Council meetings are generally not the Russian members of those organizations. So it'll be up to the Russian state if they allow Russian Indigenous members to travel internationally, or if there are any sanctions against any of this travel. But for me, that you could easily have the Arctic Council with the A7 and the 5 other permanent participants. That wouldn't be an issue.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Gill.
Thank you very much, Madame Gill.
Ms. Idlaut, you have 6 minutes. Again, to our 2 witnesses, if you want to hear If it's not spoken in English and you want to hear it, choose the English on the interpretation. Please go ahead, Missy.
For Heather Nicole.
Ma question s'adresse à Heather Nicole.
I didn't hear it.
Malheureusement, l'interprète n'a pas entendu la question.
Question for me, I didn't.
Désolée,
I
j'ai
didn't
pas
hear
entendu
it.
la question. Donnez-nous un moment, nous allons vérifier ce qui se passe.
The headsets.
Nous n'avons pas entendu l'interprétation.
I believe she said, in my perspective, Inuit and Indigenous leaders are already experts in the land. They have lived in time of immortal. My question is, when talk about capacity building, what do you actually mean?
Que voulez-vous dire? Excusez-moi, nous allons
I didn't hear
reprendre. Nous allons réinitialiser votre...
That's a very good. That's a very good question.
So you understood the question? Some of us didn't hear it. So wait, we're going to re-ask the question.
Sivuldang met koyan na me tunga sukte passe ilon na se sivuldang me aperinak tunga Heather Nicole uvangari takuyakut Inuit na nakakak si mayut kauye mayok jwa.
The first question will be, in perspective, Inuit Indigenous people have already experts on the land. They have lived on since immortal. My question is,
Voilà ma question.
when you talk about capacity building, what do you actually mean?
Que voulez-vous vraiment dire?
My question to Nicole.
Question s'adresse à la députée.
So what I think, the way I mean this is that at this particular point in time, we have agencies and we have government agencies, public safety, and we have Canadian Armed Forces that are doing things in terms of responding. We have RCMP and other agencies that respond to disaster, to events. There isn't as much capacity for those in the north or there isn't as much capacity, opportunity for those in the north to exercise their own agency in ways that are part of that disaster response scenario, particularly on a large scale. There's a need to bring together both the resources that some of our governmental agencies, both federal and territorial, have, and bring them together and match them with exactly that knowledge that Inuit and others who live in northern Canada have, and to create appropriate programming that develops that and brings that capacity to the forefront, because it's a question of security and safety for people that live there, and it's a question of involving people that live there rather than having it externally organized and mandated, and all the training coming from outside of the north, or even from other countries, which and that's part of the problem too. So I think it's bringing it home to integrate knowledge that is already there.
Thank you. She disappeared.
Una aperiyo magam Canada kanok ay vatyakan nakpadleron ng mga piyunaw te kagaruagata so kama ukyok taktong mit pigiyaw nakaktaw tidluta Canada min so
The final question on both will be, how can Canada argue better its legal position Arctic sovereignty based on Inuit use and occupancy?
You define sovereignty. On the question of the Northwest Passage, it's more of a maritime issue. On the question that is most pertinent is the extended continental shelf, and that is the seabed. So it's not an area that has been occupied or ever could be occupied by humans. It goes beyond 350 miles into the Arctic Ocean. And so human occupation is not a condition of extending your sovereignty for that seabed. And so certainly, Inuit contributions and representation in the Canadian Arctic are important, but in the most near-term kind of disputes on Arctic sovereignty, that human use and occupation will not be of importance. It's not even about the marine column. It's simply about the seabed and the ability of a country to be able to regulate that seabed of the extended continental shelf.
Heather,
Heather, would you also like to answer that?
The role of Arctic youth in, and could you just repeat the question quickly? Just the end piece.
Canada, I would check on Nagunakpakanok, Takwa, Piyunau to Kagaragata, Tana, Ukiok Taktok, Pigio, Negakta, Gasuptilugo.
The final question to both of you was, how can Canada argue better its legal position on Arctic sovereignty based on Inuit use and occupancy?
I very much think this is a really, really important issue. I firmly believe that there is a tremendous role in that. It is a very effective argument currently that's been advanced by. I've done some reading on some of the work that I think came before the Senate committee on this, and some of the I forget the law firm that was doing some work on the issue. But I think that first of all, it just absolutely, people have to understand, it has to be known that this comes under the sorts of conversations we've been having with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, the rights of Indigenous peoples to participate in conversations, because they are indeed, sovereign of their territory, and they have had that right since time immemorial. I went to a conference in Australia, and just to reassure you that I think that there is a tremendous support for this. I went to a conference in Australia, and I said something about the Northwest Archipelago being ceded from Britain in 1880, and one of our big defense leaders, I won't say who, was there and stood up and said, excuse me, just to note, and he was right, the Canadian archipelago is and the Northwest Passage is Canadian because Inuit have lived there since time immemorial. So I think the message is there. I think that the idea is just to continue to vocalize and challenge this notion that that the rights of Inuit people are in Northwest Passage and the archipelago area are constrained by documents and attitudes towards the role of Indigenous people that are probably set, from deliberations in a different century. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of our panel. I'd like to thank both Drs. Nicol and Exner-Pirot. Despite the technical challenges we had during this past hour, it was very important for us to hear from you and to get your answers to some of our questions. We very much appreciate your presence helping this panel with the current study. So thank you for being with us. We'll now recess very briefly and configure for the next panel. Thank you. For today, in this second panel, we will be hearing from three witnesses: Minister David Jonassy, Minister of Community and Government Services for the Government of Nunavut; Chief Darcy Gray from the Listuju Mi'kmaq Government; and finally from Chief Joe Alphonse of the Tsilhqot'in First Nation. For the benefit of our witnesses, you will each have 5 minutes to make opening remarks, and we'll follow that with a question period. Now, some of the questions may come in a language other than English. It could be in French or it could be in Inuktitut. So to make sure that you understand it, if English is your language, use the interpretation symbol at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a globe, and hit that and then choose English so that you'll hear you'll hear the question, and that's just for the benefit of you hearing the question if it's asked in a language other than English. So with that, I would like to get things going and would invite Minister David Jonassy to open up with 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you and good day from Nunavut. Chairperson Garneau, thank you for the invitation to present to you and your committee. Lori Hildau, member for Nunavut. Allow me to provide an opening comments and overview about emergency management in Nunavut. First of all, to paint the picture, of course, Nunavut's landmass is huge, representing roughly 20% of Canada, and our population distributed roughly 0.02 Nunavummiut per square kilometer. So it's vast, vast territory. Our population of approximately 39,000 Inuit and Northerners is just distributed across 25 fly-in communities. And each of these communities are resilient. They begin at the local level and expand outward through coordination and collaboration. While logistical challenges are many, the spirit of Nunavut is filled with resilience. Northern Canadians are most able to care for themselves and their communities in times of hardship and emergencies, and we've experienced a few of those in the recent years. Nunavut Emergency Management is responsible for the emergency measures organization and the support of search and rescue operations in Nunavut. This is guided by the Emergency Measures Act, which empowers the minister responsible for Nunavut Emergency Management to facilitate the development of emergency management programs in both territorial as well as local government. We continue efforts to complete the Territorial Business Continuity Program to see the coming into force of the Emergency Measures Act here in Nunavut. In protecting Nunavummiut, we assist both territorial and local governments to mitigate, prepare for, respond to, and recover from the impacts of emergency and disaster. Nunavut Emergency Management is focused on building relationships and learning from partnerships with northern jurisdictions. We are in constant communication with our partners in the Northwest Territories as well as Yukon to restore the Northern Roundtable on Emergency Management. And additionally, we're working closely with Yukon to support the development of their emergency management framework. We, like our northern counterparts, we contend with factors that lower accessibility, increase costs, wear on our critical infrastructure, and heighten the impact of risks. Our critical infrastructure is outdated, and the dependencies within our systems must be carefully considered. In 2022, the community of Clyde River, Kangatuapik, they enacted a local state of emergency stemming from a heavy equipment maintenance program issue, which escalated quickly with a series of blizzards. The resulting state of emergency left homes without heating fuel, water tanks without water, and community members without access to emergency services, amongst other critical needs. Successful response efforts ended this emergency there. But I'd like to say that emergency preparedness is the thin line between successful mitigation and disaster. Issues can compound quickly, and the challenges our population faces magnify. Broken machinery quickly becomes about access to food and security. We face a tipping point where strained housing infrastructure suffers damage and leads to loss of homes and contributes to overcrowding. Risk factors for communicable diseases like tuberculosis climb. The health system strains to respond to surging need, and the impact is large and varied across and dispersing across the entire territory. The territorial emergency preparedness brings an about face to the cascade, and our emergency preparedness in Nunavut is a combination of a 72-hour community preparedness and the all hazards plan approach. Geography, distance, age of infrastructure, our runway length, and sea lift season are consistent considerations in our approach to territorial risk management. We support short to medium term response by stockpiling equipment capable of handling scale and being transported on small aircrafts. Nunavut's all hazard plan reflects community identified risks using a hazard identification and risk assessment. Nunavut Emergency Management aims to deliver biannual training to each municipality, and training and program development sessions include review, update, and testing of community plans. We ensure that roles and responsibilities are clearly identified and defined within each hamlet. And the result of our training effort is an up-to-date emergency response plan in each of the 25 communities. The next step of our municipal training program is to ensure comprehensive planning is in place for all identified hazards. In closing, I want to recognize the importance emergency responses in protecting Nunavut from disaster, and recognize that our federal and northern partners are important contributors to protecting Nunavut. When issued scale beyond territorial capacity, we can rely on Public Safety Canada to deliver lifelines to the territory. So at this time, I'd like to thank everyone for your time, and merci our federal partners as well for their ongoing support during times of emergency and disaster.
Thank you, Minister. We'll now go to Chief Darcy Gray. Chief, you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to speak with you today. My name is Darcy Gray, and I'm the Chief of the Listigoch Mi'kmaq government. I want to share that on behalf of Listigoch, our hearts are with our Mi'kmaq brothers and sisters and all those who've been affected by Hurricane Fiona. In the spring of 2018, our community experienced significant flooding in several homes due to a perfect storm of events: heavy snowfall in the winter, rapidly warming temperatures, and heavy rains. It was a Friday evening around the end of April when a few calls came in because of basements flooding. Help was sent. Then as more calls kept coming in, it wasn't long before we realized we had to act on a much larger scale. The next morning, we established a command center in our natural resource building, bringing in staff from public security, capital and infrastructure, communications, health, and various other departments. A call center was created. Our rangers and fire department were doing initial assessments and check-ins, delivering and setting up some pumps when needed. The responses were swift and rather well coordinated with a touch of chaos. I can remember at one point handing my personal credit card to one of our social workers to drive to Bathurst, New Brunswick, an hour away to buy all the pumps they had because locally there was nothing else available. Staff from our health department ensured proper self-care for those responding and helped to flag which homes may have special circumstances or additional risks because of health concerns. Larger pumps were brought in to move the water out of key areas and hopefully lower the risks of additional flooding. Community members volunteered and offered pumps or generators, whatever they could to help. We did what we had to, coming together as we often do in times of crisis. We were also in contact with emergency management at ISC. The support was greatly appreciated. They helped us to find equipment and supplies. They provided guidance and support during the initial response and throughout the work that followed. After the initial crisis response, assessments were done by a third-party project management firm. Approximately 55 homes had been identified and assessed for repairs because of the flooding. The report outlined the scope of the repairs and approximate cost, indicating that basements would need to be gutted and cleaned, including mold remediation, membranes, and waterproofing at a minimum. In many cases, the entire foundation needed to be lifted and rebuilt because of high groundwater levels. The instructions received at this time from emergency management was to get things moving and get things done as quickly as possible and to build back better. We hired teams to clean and clear out the basements that had flooded. We documented, tracked, and supported to the best of our collective ability. We moved and we got things done. After several months, the project shifted within the ISC regional office from emergency management to infrastructure. The switch brought new criteria to determine which houses qualified for repair, limiting it specifically to homes that flooded because of the increased groundwater levels that occurred in the spring of 2018. The new criteria reduced the number of qualifying homes to about 40. However, we had already cleared out most, if not all, the homes identified in the first assessment. We needed an answer for those 15 homes. LMG Capital and Infrastructure worked with ISC Infrastructure to find a solution, and ISC agreed to cover the cost of repairs, but not the cause of the flooding, creating a problematic gap. The basements would flood again if we could not address the main cause. Our capital infrastructure team found solutions to these gaps and addressed the causes of flooding for the remaining homes as well. We completed the various phases of the remediation efforts in 2020, and none of the homes have flooded again. But we hold our breath every spring while we monitor closely. These events and efforts place tremendous stress on the staff intervening and families affected. Those who helped in the cleanup found themselves also supporting families who had lost irreplaceable items, such as precious photo albums. Our health staff provided support to the families dealing with trauma while helping complete forms to replace items lost or access subsidies to offset the cost of being displaced from their home for weeks and months. We had dedicated staff in finance working with the support workers in health to track, monitor, record, report, process payments, and meet reporting requirements, while also trying to meet the expectations of those affected. Our people felt the strain, our staff felt the strain, our organization felt the strain. Furthermore, I must highlight the efforts of everyone involved, from those who first responded to those who helped rebuild and repair the homes and get families back home, and all those who collaborated and provided support along the way at ISC and LMG, everyone in between. Our response was not perfect, but overall we viewed it as a successful one. And since then, we've continued to work with ISC, providing training on emergency management for staff and elected members of council. We've also recognized the importance of good communication and collaboration internal to LMG and with ISC, which helped tremendously during our pandemic response. I should also note that assessing the root problems has led to many flood mitigation projects in the community to deal with the high groundwater levels. And I thank you for the opportunity to share this with you today.
Thank you very much, Chief Gray. We'll now go to Chief Joe Alphonse. Chief, you have 5 minutes. So, Chief, you're still in mute. If you could unmute.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of the Tsilhqot'in National Government, we would like to thank the committee on the invitation to appear on this important topic. Today, I will be speaking to the need of emergency preparedness within the Tsilhqot'in Nation, the only nation in Canada with the recognition of Aboriginal title from the Supreme Court of Canada in 2014. In 2017, Tsilhqot'in Nation experienced multiple wildfires that burnt in an area the size of Vancouver Island. We had 2 of the 3 largest fires in the history of Canada. 85% of my caretaker area is burnt. Nobody has better black trees than Tsilhqot'in Nation. The hardest thing with a disaster like this was the issue of jurisdiction and remoteness of our communities. In the face of outside agency imposed evacuations of our communities, many communities decided to manage their own people We're the only nation in Canada, in the history of Canada, to say no to an evacuation order. We're going to stay behind. We're going to fight this ourselves. Our nation is 7 hours north of Vancouver, one main highway in and out. We have one power distribution line to all 6 and no cell service. The repercussions of power going out includes no internet access, home phone, cold storage, and thawing of gathered foods. Coming out of the 2017 wildfire, Tsilhqot'in Nation released a report named "The Fires Awakened Us." This report has 33 calls to action. One of the best ways to ensure preparedness for Indigenous communities is to recognize their jurisdiction in preparing and managing emergency situations. This takes an investment from Canada and British Columbia to establish emergency infrastructure training for all members. This has begun with the first tripartite management agreement in Canada between Tsilhqot'in Nation, Canada, and BC. This agreement was again renewed this year. Some of the issues we face during 2017, we had IS come to our territory, come to our community, and promise that they will cover all costs related to protecting our community. Since 2017, it's been a fight. Every last financial detail has been argued and argued and argued again, to the point out of the 800,000 that was owed to us, 500,000 remained outstanding. We went into the court system, and when it became absolutely crystal clear there was no hope of them winning that case, they just paid us in full, no questions asked. I would say during times of crisis like that, the fires were never a threat to my community. Our region is dependent on forest fires. We see a lot of forest fires. We've all grown and fought fires as Indigenous people in our area. We know the area. We know this area better than BC firefighters or all of the fire help that they brought in throughout Canada and throughout the world. We had Australian, Mexican firefighters that have never seen forest fires reach the height that they did. We know all the game trails, the highways, the roads, the back roads. Times of emergency, our guys know that territory better than anyone else. It's crucial that be recognized, and we've hired our own trainees that has to be recognized and incorporated in times like this. We believe the crisis of 2017 was a result of poor forestry management practices. We've come to grow that we will be involved in every decision from this point on. What we did in 2017 was an act of self-government, and that jurisdiction has to be recognized and respected.
Thank you, Chief Alphonse. We'll now proceed with the first round of questions, beginning with the Conservatives. Mr. Shields, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the witnesses being here today. First, I'll go to the Minister in the sense of a very specific question in the sense of communication. Can you describe to me the level of communication that you have now and where you would need to go in the sense of broadband to get the coverage you need? Minister?
Thank you for the question. I believe in terms of communication, so right now, all of our communities are serviced by satellites. We are working on a fiber optic cable to connect Iqaluit over the coming few years. It can't come soon enough, but that's going to help tremendously to ensure that communication is solid and useful for every community. But going further, I think this is an area that technology is advancing, so we want to tap into that resource as soon as we can.
Suggesting is years is too long, and with technology going quickly, you need to be at the forefront to receive that kind of technology to make it work for safety. I'm guessing that's what you mean.
Well, we make do with what we have. So our emergency response team has all the communication devices, whether it's sat phones, what have you. These tools, if you'll allow, or if you may, we harness those tools and communication devices to the best of our abilities and make them available to our communities as well. Spot devices in particular have been quite successful and useful to mitigate search and rescue efforts. Thank you.
Chief Gray, in the sense of the incident, the issue that you had with flooding, same question, a sense of where are you with your communication systems and ability to do it, and what do you need next?
For us, I think the important part is continuing to build the capacity internally to address the issues. I think the other witnesses spoke to that as well, is that we have a lot of capacity in our community, and it is the collaboration and support of ISC and other governments that helps. In these times of crisis, we are. I would say we don't have the ability to just have a team on standby or people on standby that can just react in this time. And it's having those extra expertise or those extra people that can come in, whether it be equipment. We're not, so remote, but at the same time, there are still concerns with accessing certain equipment because of where we are. And I would say through these events, what we realize is having that solid plan of communication and taking a unified command approach internally and that one contact person at ISC or with other governments creates or reduces a lot of confusion that we experienced.
Going to Chief Alphonse, in a sense, when you described forestry management practices, can you just briefly explain the difference between what we've had in the past and what you believe should be done?
Yeah, I think the way forestry is managed, it's managed for profit for today and really nothing else. We have beetle epidemics that are killing trees out there, trees that are falling. The amount of fuel on the floor is unreal. And when 2017 hit, that's what created the intenseness of the fires. There's got to be more prescribed burning in early spring as our ancestors used to do, so that there is no fuel, there is no forest floor, and there is no threat. Fires are where we live in a semi-desert region of the province. We don't see a lot of rain even in a normal year. So fires is something our people have grown accustomed to and live with.
You implement in the sense that to make a difference?
I didn't get the first part of your question.
What would you implement in practices to make a difference?
I think I did just finish saying that. You implement fires in early spring fires, small regional fires, eliminate as much where there's areas of a lot of forest floor debris. Some cases, the dead wood that would be laying on the forest floor would be as high as 10 to 12 feet high. That's not good management.
To reemphasize, with the fuel that's on the floor that creates the fires, in the sense that there is a burning process to deal with that rather than just letting it grow.
Yes, to some degree, and you can also log different areas that are problematic and stuff, you should have a good assessment of an inventory of the stock that you have. A store owner is going to do the same thing and what they want to sell in their store. If we're generating revenues from our natural resources, we should know what's out there and manage it.
Thank you, Mr. Shields. We'll go to Mr. Pawlowski for 6 minutes.
I've got a couple quick ones. Chief Alphonse, maybe you could submit to the committee a written copy of your 33 calls to action coming out of your Fires Awakened Us. That way it can be part of the committee report. You don't have to tell us now, but it can be included. The second, to Minister Jonassy, you talked about Clyde River, and you said because of aging infrastructure, you had an emergency there, no fuel, no water. Can you just quickly tell us what was the problem with the infrastructure?
Thank you. Well, it was it was regarding a heavy equipment maintenance program issue that we were helping manage with the hamlet there. All of their heavy equipment operate on the fuel that they were using was not adequate per se, but and this was hindering their service to the community, plowing roads and whatnot. However, once we got that state of emergency declaration from the hamlet, we immediately provided the support that was needed at the time, looking immediately at what's there. So, for instance, the airport has a heavy equipment on site that is owned and operated by the government. We provided that to the hamlet, and we flew in diesel to ensure that the equipment can run smoothly. But this goes to show when our houses are not serviced in a timely and regular manner. I mentioned about water tanks were left empty, which of course the sewage tanks were left full. So this has a impact on the housing and the situation that individuals and families faced. The community was in great stress, and the infrastructure also suffered as a result.
Now, all three of you witnesses, Chief Gray, it was flooding, Chief Alphonse, it was fires, Minister Jonassy, it was more an infrastructure problem. However, I would suggest, because I've had problems like this in my riding with flooding as well, record flooding this spring in the Winnipeg River system in northwestern Ontario, that these sort of happenings will become more frequent as a result of climate change. Within your communities, have you looked into the possibility that you will have increasing problems because of climate change? Do you have the resources to look to that and make preparations, kind of expecting that you'll have more of this to come? Have you got the resources? Have you done the studies? So I don't know who wants to start with it. But.
So why don't we start with Chief Gray, then Chief Alphonse, and then Minister Jonassy?
Okay, so we've done some assessments of our risk for flooding, obviously, with the sharing the same concerns that you raised. With this specific flood, it was because of spring runoff, a lot of snow, and warming temperatures. I think it's something that we can anticipate is going to continue. But one of the issues that we ran into is the runoff had nowhere to go. There were key culverts, there were key sort of streams that would naturally divert the runoff in the spring that had been blocked. And so we've done a lot of remediation work over the last number of years to fix those and reduce the risk. We're also working on a shoreline restoration project and looking at how can we beef up some of those houses that live close to the shore or maybe are a little lower in the water table. And what we can do. We have, I think, 2 or 3 homes that have been recommended to actually be moved. And throughout, we're fortunate that we have had the support of ISC, and most of these projects and remediation efforts have been funded. So again, I think we're fortunate that we have a lot of capacity here and the ability to do these projects. But we continue to be very concerned and monitor what's going on around us.
Chief Alphonse?
I think to be prepared is one thing. We're prepared. We live here. We've lived here for generations. Fire comes, we know what to do. But nowadays we go from flood season in the spring to fire season to pandemics. Like, we're well rehearsed. The issue here I see is government officials. When I said earlier that the fires were never a threat to us, it was government officials that were a threat. You know, when every government official, whether they're RCMP officer or IS, came into our community during 2017, their first immediate questions were, do you guys even know how much people you have in your community? Do you guys even have a plan? Like, why is it every non-Aboriginal person automatically thinks a First Nation community automatically doesn't know what they're doing? We have the best policies and more experience than any community in Canada in dealing with fires. We would put our fire crews up against any crew in BC or in Canada. I'll guarantee you right now, my crews will win hands down. It's after the fact told us that we're not paying you guys. The federal government is not fiduciarily responsible for emergency First Nation communities in emergency situations.
Thank you, and Chief. Thank you. And Minister Jonassy?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In terms of climate change and its threats, our government, I mean, there are many threats to climate change, and in looking particularly around our infrastructure, my department, we do a lot of site assessments and investigation feasibilities, whether building a new or repairing and renovating existing infrastructure. So that information we want to also include to ensure that there's, for example, permafrost, or if there's more spring runoff, the effects of climate change is considered, and we want to have more resources around that, but not just from my department, but looking at environment, Nunavut, but also looking at the federal government. If there are those resources available, we want to tap into those resources. So if there's, by all means, we want to tap into opportunities where we can make sure that our buildings and the people that they serve are structurally sound and are able to withstand the climate that we live in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nous irons maintenant Madame Gill.
Now, Madame Gill, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks to the 3 witnesses for their presentations. First of all, I was looking at Lescouche in Quebec and the maritime areas because of Fiona that went through, the hurricane. Perhaps Chief Gray, you've had experiences with floods in the past. I have a question for you, Chief Gray, and for all witnesses. First question, what you've pointed out in your presentation relating to the various criteria which were modified during a crisis as to what remediations were available. What would you suggest so that everybody is treated in equal fashion and that the community doesn't have to worry about what's going to happen later and they can count on some support? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question. So for us, we went ahead with the work with the assumption or the direction, I guess, from the emergency management part of ISC saying, just get things done, move, repair those homes and make it happen quickly. So we did that. And surprisingly fast. We had a number of homes up in the air. We were demolishing and repairing foundations. We were doing what we were told, saying build back better. And that became the expected standard. So whenever the shifting criteria came in, and I guess from our perspective, it was understandable that perhaps the cause of the flood in some basements was not specific to 2018 rising groundwater, but perhaps of a cracked foundation or an old foundation made out of cinder blocks, which still needed to be repaired. It just didn't fall under that criteria. So I think for us, what was really important is that, or what would be really important is knowing clearly up front what those criteria would be or wouldn't. And then when you do create almost a double standard with those criteria, what other programs could supplement and support something that's very much needed. We had people that were displaced for months, living in hotels, expecting this work to be done. And then the criteria is shifting and saying, well, that home shouldn't be up in the air right now. You should not have started working on that home. That was because of a crack in the foundation, not because of high groundwater. That put a lot of strain on people. And I think having good communication and clear guidelines would have done a lot for reducing those concerns and hardships.
Merci, Chef Gray. Ça voudrait dire...
Thank you, Chief Gray. So this could endanger, well, the lack of unknown criteria would, of course, cause an obstacle to the work that be conducted and would imperil people's lives and livelihood. Thank you. I have a further question for all the witnesses. I hope we have a chance to hear from all of them. But there's one thing we hear repeatedly in your evidence, that there's a deep knowledge of good practices in each of these communities. Chief Alphonse mentioned forest fires, for example, and fire management and flood controls for the others near Baie des Chaleurs. All these communities have wide and deep experience, and how can this experience, this knowledge be pooled and shared? Is there any way of finding a common structure whereby First Nations who have intimate knowledge of the territory could share their practices, best practices, in light of what Chief Alphonse has said? We're quite aware we live with fire all the time, but also floods. So there are multiple challenges. So how can you put forward this traditional knowledge, this depth of expertise?
Perhaps Chief Alphonse, you can kick it off, and then we'll go to the Minister and then to Chief Gray.
Thank you. We again more than prepared to take on issues that are common in the Chilcotin country: floods, fires, mainly fires. But it's a matter of recognition, and we are advocating to establish evacuation center. When you evacuate communities, a lot of times they're evacuated to big city centers, and their centers are set up in gymnasiums, cot after cot, this often reminds our people of residential schools. That's not appropriate. And, the food that's served is not culturally appropriate. Our people, they want meat and salmon, and they want meat and salmon well cooked. And they just want it with rice or potatoes. So should be culturally appropriate. I know those people are meaning well, but they're missing the mark, and they have to listen to its Indigenous leaders. We have, like I said, my plans, my emergency preparedness in my community is probably better than any other community in governance. So, our biggest obstacle is to recognize, like their guidelines when 2017 was constantly moving, and even wanting reimbursement. Like they have one standard for BC wildfires and another standard for Indigenous peoples. We just want to know what the regulations and rules are. We do that, we'll follow that. We have chartered accountants on staff to track every last detail of our expenditures and all of that, and yet we still have to fight all of this. It's embarrassing, to tell you the truth.
Merci. Est-ce que je peux intervenir, monsieur?
May I cut in here, Mr. Chairman? I know that time is short, and I would like to know if they could perhaps send us something in writing, what kind of structure they might propose. I think that would be a much more fulsome answer than what we're going to get in a minute and a half.
Our witnesses, the request has been made. If you could provide answers to the question that was asked, perhaps in writing to the committee, would that be a possibility? I see Chief Gray nodding, and Chief Jonassy, or I beg your pardon, Minister Jonassy as well, and thank you for your answer, Chief Alphonse. We'll go to our next panelist, Ms. Idlout. Ms. Idlout, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you. First, to all the witnesses, I'd like to welcome all of you. You're very interesting topics you're talking about. The first, I'd like to just ask a question to Minister Jonassy, and I'm very grateful I'll be able to talk to you in Inuktitut in my language. The first of all, I'd like to ask you, in the Parliament, we hear the word crisis every day. You should mention that critical infrastructure is outdated. Has your department, because they're too old infrastructures, I'd like to ask you, your department estimated dollar figure to meet the critical needs for the infrastructures for the people of Nunavut, if they can be properly prepared with the critical needs in their communities.
Thank
you. Idlout. They're very expensive in the north, and there are a lot of them for the crisis needs. I can say every year we get funding. We request funding through the with our government. The government of Canada also allocated some funds for the needs for the infrastructure, and it's never enough. This is a very big topic and our big responsibility. Thank you that you provide funds, but certainly it's not. We still need a lot of funds for our critical needs. if you can understand me. Can you clarify approximately how much money or dollar figures you need to meet those critical needs? So exactly how much are you requesting? Are you actually needing to deal with these critical issues?
If I can put a dollar figure, I'd be in the billions probably easily. Just water and wastewater infrastructure alone, our communities are facing quite substantial need around infrastructure. However, we are trying to make progress with the financial resources that we do have available that have been earmarked for major projects. I can't specify a dollar figure, but it easily will be in the billions, and that's just, I can say, like my department, since we're involved with capital planning process for our government, so we serve all the other departments when they're creating new schools, health centers, whatnot. All those other areas as well are piling, and the need is just so great. But I wish I could give you an exact figure. It'd be very difficult to pinpoint exactly, but I could easily say beyond the billions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer and your clarification. My other question. This summer, I was in Rankin Inlet, Nunavut. I was told by Mayor Tatwini that the critical need to update the water infrastructure without the proper investments, is the community able to proper emergency preparedness plan? So in Rankin Inlet, do they have a proper emergency preparedness plan for their water infrastructure?
Thanks again, Ms. Idlo, for the question. We work with every community to ensure they have an up-to-date community emergency response plan, including around water availability, water source. And this is an area our government is trying to address for Rankin Inlet specifically. There's going to be heavy investments that we're putting towards the water infrastructure, recognizing that there's a great need in this particular community, not just turning the tap water on, but also just the growth around what's the community is experiencing around other facilities that are being built or slated to be built. And then in the long haul, the water treatment plant was in need of an upgrade, so that will be part of the process. That we're looking at a three-prong approach to Rankin Inlet. But to answer the question, yes, we do have response plans in Kangalsinuk as well as other communities to ensure they know what to do in case the water taps run out. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our witnesses. That will conclude our panel, but I know I speak on behalf of the committee in thanking you for your testimony today. You have all been living real emergencies, and you've described them very, very accurately and very vividly. And you've also made some important recommendations. So we very much appreciate you taking the time to meet with the committee today. Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to call this meeting. Oh, just before I do, for everybody, the next meeting is for a discussion of the non-insured health benefits report. Please come with your questions and comments. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.